Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organisation create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your hosts, Mark Bidwell and Roddy Miller.
Hello, I'm Roddy Miller, your co-host on the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. In our previous show, Mark was in conversation with Emmanuel Gobiot, discussing followership and the importance of employees connecting with their organisation's purpose. Please hop over to our website, www.innovationecosystem.com, to take a listen. And if you've not done so already and like our shows, please do subscribe on iTunes or add to your favourite on Stitcher if you're an Android user. If you sign up for our newsletters, you'll get regular updates on new shows, links to offers from our guests, and also interesting innovation content that Mark and I come across in our daily travels and discussions. Today, I'm speaking with Stephen MacGregor, the CEO and founder of the Leadership Academy Barcelona. Barcelona is, of course, replete with full-service business schools, but Stephen's organisation, the Leadership Academy Barcelona, is fully focused on developing business performance through health and well-being, a more holistic approach, and aimed not just at the individual, but also for teams and whole organisations. Stephen is a PhD in design management from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow and has been a visiting researcher at Stanford and Carnegie Mellon universities. He's a recognised expert in design and sustainability and has taught over 500 sessions at leading business schools and universities, including IMD in Switzerland, ESA in Spain, and SEABS in Shanghai, China. Stephen's focus on executive health and performance is underpinned by his own academic and physical training. He's a former national duathlon champion and has trained with Olympic athletes, Tour de France riders, and Ironman winners, and he currently races for the athletics team of FC Barcelona. So, we're delighted to have him here.
Stephen, it's great to be with you this morning.
Pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, Roddy.
Stephen, we've known each other for a little while. I met you at IMD last year. You are, like myself, a Scotsman, but you've made the clever move down to Barcelona where the sun shines. Do you want to just very quickly tell me a little bit about your journey to doing that? Because you, as I've just said, are focused these days on sort of executives, performance and sustainability. So how did you get to focusing on that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 13 years in Spain now, which is hard to believe. And the funny thing was, I came looking for better weather, but ended up in the rainy part of Spain in the Basque Country. So after living in a year and a half, I was doing my postdoc in San Sebastian. I felt that I had to really look for sunshine or go home. So that's when we came to Barcelona. First of all, in 2004, and then we spent several years in Girona. And that helped also with the eventual focus on executive performance, because I started, doing a lot of, sports there myself. I have a big background in sports, and actually forming a sports tours company in Girona. So at the same time, I was riding my bike and training myself and teaching at the time at different universities. I felt that why don't I try and bring these things together? And it was about the same time. This was then moving on to 2007. I found the Corporate Athlete article in Harvard Business Review, and I felt that was a real kind of, opportunity to try and build on something that was already there.
Fantastic. And you've been obviously exploring and researching that area ever since. You published your book, Sustaining Executive Performance, last year, or just the end of 2014, I think it was. That's based on a couple of sort of major models that or frameworks that you build around. The central one, perhaps, or the primary one is the triple lens of sustainability. Do you want to just explain a little bit about what that is and how that works?
Yeah, I mean, my background is in design, so I have a PhD in design, and the sports side was a personal passion. But then I started to, really think, what are the linking points between executive performance, and whether that be through the metaphor of sport or not necessarily, if you just regard health on a general level, and also design within an organization. And I think design for me, because I have a background in that field, it encourages you to try and look for the connection points between different fields. It's a very broad-based education. You look for solutions on a breadth versus depth level, first of all. And because of that background in design, I was really looking at, okay, so what is the connection between health and design within the organization? And then the third part of the equation was that I started doing a lot of research into corporate social responsibility, which is where I guess sustainability has its most conventional home. If you say to many people, what does sustainability mean, they'll conceive it in notions of sustainable development and responsibility for the environment and things like that. So basically, because I started doing a lot of research and teaching in these three areas, I started thinking, well, what is the link between them? Sustainability in the conventional sense at the societal level. But for me, health for executives was about personal sustainability. And design was about actually being innovative within an organization so that organization could be sustainable over time in terms of its value generation. So for me, those were the three kind of conceptions of sustainability that I actually thought, after really reflecting on them, for several years, they did fit quite well together.
That's really interesting. I mean, does that mean that one flows necessarily into the other, though? Do you need to start with that focus on the personal in order to affect the organizational or even the wider ecosystem, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, lots of great work out there, practitioner-based, research-based, that, will look at, the societal macro level, or they will only look at, the organizational sustainability, whether that be through design or innovation strategy in general. But for me, it very much is a bottom-up approach. It's starting with the individual, and it's really looking at how we can make enterprises more human-based and invest in the long term in the health of people, which then gives that long-term performance. So for me, I think, personally speaking, looking at a lot of health and well-being programs around the world, they don't always tend to be successful because I don't think they strike the right tone. They look at health and well-being as a very isolated thing. But for me, I've always looked at, how can health and well-being, investing in people, how can we look at the business case, right? We can improve their health, we can improve their well-being, we can lower stress and things like that. But at the end of the day, we can really improve their performance. And then there's links to the other two views of sustainability that we look at in our work.
Are you seeing that increasingly then in the clients that you work with, that there is a broader acceptance that health element and the energy that goes with it, because I think energy is a significant part of it, but there's a more holistic approach to how organizations are dealing with their employees, their staff, and their senior executives?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's more of an awareness of the importance of it. I don't think really any organization has the answer, so to speak. I'm not saying that, we have the answer in our work either. I think it's a very difficult topic to look at, right? How you can have that balance, I guess. And even the word balance has been derided in the kind of, the business press the last couple of years, but it really has to be about balance, right? How can you get a return on an employee within an organization? How can you move that organization forward, but have that balance that people still have, their lives to lead, and they're not, working too many hours during the week, and they're not all consumed by work. So, organizations, they are very aware of it. Even the technological revolution in the last several years, the opportunity to be connected 24/7. Where does work stop? All these things are up in the air, and it's a very difficult topic. There is more interest. I think there's lead users. If I take a concept from design, there are companies who are lead users, and I think a lot of the business schools in the last couple of years have put this topic into their core programs, even senior executive programs, whereas in the past that wouldn't have been the case. It's a work in progress, certainly, but I think there's much more interest now. Yeah.
And it's that focus, isn't it, around the work not becoming all-consuming that I think is the critical part of it. And in today's world, we see people becoming entirely self-defining around their work, perhaps at the expense of outside interests, and that narrows their horizons. I think that fits quite nicely in, though, doesn't it, with your 5 elements model, which is move, recover, focus, fuel, and train. Now, I'm sure we could speak for half an hour on each of those, but I just wanted to pick up on the recovery one, because I think that's possibly an area that we fail to look at very, very much. In athletes, recovery is certainly a big part of the training regime and how they prepare themselves. But with executives, we don't necessarily tend to think of recovery as part of the strategy we should be using. What are you explaining to executives around recovery?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, first of all, it's saying exactly that. It's saying, it's not just about doing less. There is a strong business case, or let's say in general, a performance case of recovery that is, absolutely critical in sport and other fields. So that's the first part. But I think it's also saying to executives, there's different forms of recovery. I mean, the big one recently, of course, has been there's a lot of interest in sleep and the importance of sleep for performance and for executive and critical thinking, and that's one of the main elements in the work that we do on recovery. But it's also transmitting a message that recovery comes in different forms and it can come in different time periods. Right? It's actually about saying to executives, be clever with the spend or the use of your time. Another field of study that has been very popular in the last couple of years is, of course, mindfulness. And even to give one example, we actually do mindfulness-based exercises which may even last just 60 seconds. So if executives in a day that can last 10, 12, 14 hours, if they're a little bit more clever in periods of time of 60 seconds to be more mindful, or a couple of minutes to go for a short walk, or 5 minutes just to do a little bit more on meditation, this can make a big difference. Instead of checking email for the 100th time or repeating yourself to your team for the 50th time that day. So just being a little bit more, I guess, mindful of practice during a long day, and recognizing that recovery isn't just the golden 7 or 8 hours sleep that we should get at night. It's also the short time periods within a busy day.
And that's something that is pretty manageable, presumably. It's much more of a mindset issue of whether people are prepared to do it or not. Are there models or strategies to get people to remember to be mindful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an engineer, so as I said, my background is in design, but it's engineering design, and I take a very pragmatic approach to my research and to my teaching. So it's, I within the framework that we have within the program, it's asking people to do things that we think are very possible. They do take a change in mindset, but they also have a big impact. And further, also, it's also things that we do in the team ourselves. So we don't actually, we read research, we look at what's coming out from the science base, we look at leading cases in business, and we apply many of these things ourselves before then putting that into the classroom or into the training context.
And this works equally well across all different types of organizations, does it? Or do you find that smaller organizations are more able to embrace it? Do you have a reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the work that we did in corporate social responsibility, we found that, for example, that was more of a natural proposition for small companies. You still had the founder, the entrepreneur, the owner, manager in charge, and they were more aware of a broader range of stakeholders, for example, like the local community. So that was more of a natural thing. And I think health for employees in many small companies, that is more of a natural proposition. Sometimes smaller companies find it harder to attract the talent, so that they know that when they have a good performer, they have to invest in that person in the longer term. So that's certainly the case. I think it depends on larger companies. I think they're just being more convinced of the business case now, and in general, I'd say that larger companies are probably a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of new trends and things like that. So as the interest in health and performance is picking up speed the last couple of years, then I think what you find is that what I found is that the larger companies seem to be gaining speed and catching up and taking over the smaller companies.
Is there an infrastructure there, though, that needs to be put in place, do you think? Or is this kind of focus on personal health one that is essentially costless from the organization's point of view?
I think ideally, I think even if you look at other fields, like innovation, or even back when I was doing my PhD, a lot of the interest in knowledge management. What a lot of the literature at the time said that eventually the sign of maturity is that these things become invisible because everyone in the organization owns them, right? You don't have an innovation department, you don't have knowledge management department. Everyone contributes or quality. Even if you go back to the 1980s and the total quality management movement, everyone owns it. So I think ideally that should be the case. In a mature organization, but I think to get there, you need some sort of structure, you need some sort of champion within an organization. HR, I think for sure it is there, but often it is then derailed when things get tough within the organization. So I think one of the key points is that the senior people within the organization, the real senior directors, preferably CEO, they have to, if not through policy, they have to show an example through their small actions and their habits. How do they communicate on a weekend with their team? What is their culture on, vacation during the year and things like that, right? And I'm not saying that it's about doing less work. It's about, making it fit for context. But what is the norm within the organization, and who's leading the charge, so to speak, yeah?
There's a great piece at the end of your book about, I think it's the COO from Telefonica, who's you'd had an interview with, and he is an exemplar, I think, of that sort of frantically active business life, but with a consciousness of balancing that against his outside and external interests. I mean, is that an unusual situation, or are you seeing that in lots of senior leaders these days?
I think I'm picking up on messages. I've had the privilege. There's an interview that I did with Jose Maria Alvarez Payete. He's a marathon runner, and he has a lot of, I guess, balance in his life, and some of the other things that he does on a daily basis. Pays a lot of attention, I guess, to communication on the basic level. He places a lot of importance on reading and things like that. And I think you see these messages in other leaders, at least just what I'm picking up on, and in the business press, a lot of leaders talking about the importance of sleep and how that changed their approach to life. I think, if you look at a company like Amazon, which has been criticised a little in the past several months in terms of the culture of overwork and things like that, but also Jeff Bezos talked about the importance of sleep for him. He talked about the most important thing in his life or his work is his 12 hours of work that he does on a daily basis. He's a real hard worker, but the second most important thing is the 8 hours of sleep that he gets to support that. So I think you're seeing a lot more messages like that. Does it mean that these people are perfect? And no, so in our framework we have these 5 elements, but I guess it's a little bit unrealistic to expect that people cover each of the bases of these 5 elements every single day of their lives. Right? It could be that they compromise on one and they look at maximizing the other. So I think, there's signs of senior leaders following these things, but I guess partially would be the answer to that.
And picking up on that sort of 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest. I mean that, as you have highlighted, is not a new model at all. It's been, it was first perhaps highlighted by Robert Owen's work at New Lanark outside Glasgow. When was that? In the 60s, 70s, something like that.
Yeah.
So this model has been around for a while. Why do you think it's taken so long for it to get wide acceptance?
Yeah, so it was around for a while, I guess, right? But was it ever really followed? I think I go into detail in the book that Ford Motor Company were one of the first in the kind of early 1900s to go towards the 888 model by reducing the amount of hours worked in a day and also improving conditions. I don't know. It's interesting. I think a lot of it is the technological revolution the last, several years, which means that we're kind of always on. I've reflected on this in the past also with other people that I've met who are, so highly motivated within their work. And if you can have that, your work is your passion, then fantastic. So essentially for these people, play and work was there was no distinction, right? So they were resting and then they were awake, and when they were awake, their work was their play. For most of us, that's not the case, or there is some distinction. I think what it now becomes, I think, is that it's not simply a serial nature, and as is in the past. You would be in the office for 8 hours or more or less. You'd be at home, which would be your play time, I guess, or out of the office, and then you would be sleeping for 8 hours, more or less. But I think what's happening now is that because work is potentially 24/7, then that really takes over. But then the question is, how can play and rest come into the traditional domain that was, previously exclusively only for work? And I think you're seeing some things like that, Google with their nap pods, so that they expect their workers to be in the office for a long amount of time, but they also expect that if they're going to do that, they have the opportunity to go bowling and to play within that environment, and also to sleep or to nap within that environment. So that 3-8 or that 888 model is back on the agenda, but is becoming more of this integrated 8 model where everything is at play at the same time.
I see that completely, and we know, don't we, that people tend to have their best ideas, or they start to really truly make sense of things when they've stepped back from direct work. So it's when you're taking a shower or when you're walking the dog or things that suddenly you have your innovative thoughts, and you go, yes, and you see the pieces coming together. So are you saying that there's a real opportunity, particularly in trying to create innovative cultures, to allow that space and that perhaps detachment from the frantic work to go on?
Absolutely. I mean, real opportunities, but with any big opportunities, there are big challenges as well. So I think, for certain people, that is just such a difficult thing to manage. And even for a company, that is just so difficult to manage also. It's just the complexity is just increased by an amazing amount. And again, I don't know if I have the answer, but that's the world that we live in, and it would increasingly be so, I think.
I mean, you do training with some high quality athletes. You train down on the athletic side, I think it is, but down at FC Barcelona, and you've worked with top Olympic athletes too. Is that an approach that they take? How similar is their regimes, where they're obviously at the pinnacle of their physical performance, compared to that of top executives?
Yeah, I think, it is the fact that they are always on in a very similar fashion. I think they probably, I don't know if it's good or bad or a little bit of both, but what you'll see with big athletes is that they're probably required to be on real performance mode, possibly less than top executives. Whether that be a competition, for the real top athletes, obviously it's competition mode like that every 4 years for the Olympics, or for many other sports, it's maybe on an annual level, the big event, and during the year, maybe 8 or 10 times where they're expected to peak. The executives need to be on, or they need to be performing on a much more regular basis, I think. But there is a very similar dynamic at play with always being on. And just, I guess, it becomes, the more that they do it, I think, then it becomes part of human nature, and it's just the way that things are. So I think, executives, or if you're a CEO in a company, your life is very much, dedicated to that mission for that time that you're in that role. And I think for other people in a company, it's actually just getting used to that always on mode. And then getting back to previous comments is then about how can you be smart to recover within these short time frames, which normally we're not so good at doing.
Which is a perfect moment, perhaps, to ask you. So, how do you personally do that? I mean, do you have particular routines that help you achieve that?
Yeah, I mean, sport has been a big part of my life since I was 13 years old. I've always been a runner, cycling, and things like that. So that's probably the big one for me. And I'm lucky enough to live in a part of Barcelona which is very close to the mountain that overlooks the city. And if I feel stressed or overworked or anything like that, then I go for a run. It's as simple as that. And I think running is one of those things that is very accessible. So if I have a heavy travel period, then it's also something that you can do very easily, even if you're traveling, you're in an airport or something like that. They're generally gyms within airports, and you can find this thing. So I think running is the big thing, and I guess just being with family, right? Taking my dog for a walk, and being with my son, and just trying to disconnect from technology. I think that's the big thing. Some little things that I do. I talk about marginal gain theory, which obviously was made very popular with British cycling. So we talk about what are the marginal gains that you can put in your own life. And even some little things that I've done in the last couple of years is, turn email off my phone, for example, so that, I'm not always reacting to emails that are coming in. And over the full weekend, maybe just don't check email because it's not on the phone, but you can still use your phone for other things. So little things like that, and always just being aware of the power of small change is the way that I would recover, I think.
I think there are two fascinating things that come out of that. The bit about email is a powerful message to us all, I think. I'm just intrigued. Do you, having now done that, think that you've missed out on anything by having turned off email, or is life exactly as it would have been, but even though you've answered those emails 48 hours later?
Yes, it's the exact same. I think with anything, you have those withdrawal symptoms. If you do it for the first time, you have that anxiety, but then you quickly realize that things more or less stay the same. And I think it's a big piece of evidence on many of the emails that you get, you kind of create yourself. So I personally found that the volume, or the ability to manage the volume, has probably even decreased with the less emails that I send personally.
And the other one is, you mentioned your young son. We all know that affects our sleep patterns. You must be more consciously aware of the impact of that than most parents. Is that something you've had to manage particularly?
Yeah, no, it was great fun. It's funny because I came to the parenthood game, I guess, pretty late in the game. I mean, my son's now coming up for 15 months. I just turned 39, and it was as if going into the field. So my background in design, I've done ethnographic field research, and it was as if it was an opportunity for me to really test some of my theories in the field. It was an interesting period. And it was exactly as I'd thought before in a lot of the papers that I'd read, whereby it doesn't matter the amount of time that you're actually sleeping or in bed. It's the importance of uninterrupted sleep. So, sleep is a process. We go through a cycle, and if that is interrupted, then that is the big impact, right? And then other things like, short-term memory is immensely affected by these interruptions and poor quality sleep. And just your ability to look for that higher level of thinking or executive function thinking that is talked about in the literature. So it was a challenging few months, but it was something that I took the opportunity to put back into the classroom. It was interesting.
Well, I think that's something that all of us who've had children are fully aware of, and that recovery period is can be longer or shorter, clearly, depending on your children.
Yeah.
A question I always like to ask it also is, you mentioned that you're 39 now. What advice would you give yourself looking back to when you were 20 or 25?
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems that was yesterday. 25 anyway was an interesting age because I had just finished my PhD and I'd moved to Spain. To San Sebastian. I don't know. Thinking on that, I don't know if I think, what would I do? One thing I was thinking about, make more mistakes, but I made plenty of mistakes, Absolutely. I think maybe just have a little bit more fun, maybe not take myself so seriously, right? Just always thinking about what's coming in the future, and just, I don't know, if it's being more mindful about just enjoying the journey, enjoying the ride, both the ups and downs. That maybe just be the one thing that I would say.
Fantastic. Stephen, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you very much indeed. I think there's lots of really positive lessons that we can draw from that, and hopefully our listeners and myself indeed will be able to put some of those into action. I'm going to go and turn my email off very soon and see how that works. Stephen MacGregor, thank you very much.
Many thanks. Thanks, Roddy. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Stephen MacGregor. Once again, I was struck by the intense passion our guests have about their subjects. Even after just a handful of these shows, we're hearing that passion come through every time. But also, as Oric Wolf highlighted in our conversation a couple of weeks ago, how that passion is a necessary prerequisite for being at the top of your game. If you do not have that energy and curiosity, then you'll never be sufficiently committed to become a leader in your field or a leader of others. More specifically with Stephen, he made clear that the foundation of his work is an integrated, holistic understanding of people and organizations. Organizations need to invest in the health of their people to make sure their enterprises are more human. And the follow-on from that employees' health and well-being should not be just something isolated from the rest of the business processes, but an integral part of them. And that there is a strong business case for this. Happy, healthy employees perform better. We touched on Stephen's 5-part model and explored more deeply one of those elements, recovery. I think one of the greatest insights here is that not that long ago, a mere decade or two, everyone could compartmentalize their days into 8-hour segments of work, sleep, and leisure fairly easily. But with modern technology, work encroaches into leisure all the time, and often into your sleep too. And Stephen's advice that we therefore need to take leisure, and occasionally even sleep, into our work to balance these rhythms is a very powerful concept, be that through 5-minute walks or the odd power nap. It is, in fact, very human to do so. Finally, I want to reference marginal gain theory, which Stephen mentioned right at the end of our talk. This is a powerful approach used by the UK Olympic cycling team to great effect in 2012. We provide some links to further information about it in the show notes, so do take a look. Next week, Mark talks to the self-styled millennial mentor Gerard Adams, who brings a New York hustle approach to leadership and innovation, quite different in tone from what we've heard here so far, and well worth listening in for. If you enjoy these shows, we'd really appreciate if you can take a couple of moments to rate and review them on iTunes. They take a good bit of time and energy to put together, and we love to get your feedback that way. So many thanks to Claudia K, Synchronous Leadership, Alimore42, UNL, and all the other listeners who have left reviews. We do really appreciate them. Keep them coming. And also, contact us if you have any questions for our guests or other comments. We look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to being with you again shortly.